Hey folks, this is Rhykker, bringing you 5 beginner tips for Overwatch. In this video, we're going to go over the importance of playing the objective, playing as a team, team composition, your melee attack, and the difference between health, shields, and armor. So starting off with tip number 1, play the objective. I can't stress this enough. This isn't a team deathmatch game. Blizzard specifically did not include any game mode that is just a straight up TDM. The game isn't balanced for that. The heroes aren't balanced for that. This is very much an objective based game. And everything revolves around playing the objective. It doesn't matter if you kill the enemy more than they kill you. If you don't play the objective, you're not going to win. Now, killing the enemy is often a very integral part to playing the objective, which is the great news. But don't forget, don't get that tunnel vision chasing down a tracer for 30 seconds when that tracer is wasting your time deliberately to distract you from capping that control point. The moment of the game when this is most crucial is when you just have a few seconds left and you gotta get on the point or on the payload to move things into overtime. Again, we can't stress this enough. It doesn't matter if you're most likely going to die, you're definitely going to lose if you don't try to get on the point at all. Even if you live 1 second to stretch out that overtime meter, you're going to have teammates coming back. Again, maybe you're going to give yourself a 5% chance of making a comeback, but 5% is more than nothing if you just hang back and snipe. Now, of course, that's not to say that snipers should be always going on the point. Again, we were talking about that one critical phase of the game at the very end. But if you're gonna set up as a sniper, make sure you're doing it in a place where you are playing the objective. Now what that means could differ depending on whether you're playing King of the Hill, attack, or defense. But if you're nowhere near the objective, if all you're doing is just trying to find easy kills, then odds are you're not contributing to your team winning the game as much as you possibly can be. Let's take, for instance, a scenario where your entire team, you're on defense, and your entire team is right outside the enemy spawn, just stomping them to the ground. Every time they come out those gates, you just kill them over and over. That's great. However, it's entirely possible that, and highly recommended, that one or many of those team members just switch to Tracer, zip past everyone, get to the control point, and hey, where are you guys? You're playing TDM. You're spawn camping. No one's there to protect the control point, and they cap it. I can't count the number of times that I've seen teams lose games because they just didn't contest an objective. And it's just a victory handed to the enemy team. Don't be one of those guys. Play the objective, that's what wins you games. Second point, play as a team. How often has it happened to you that your team has a control point, you're held up really well, you're well defended, you're set up, and you just see the enemies coming in, trickling in one at a time as they keep respawning? How effective is that? Well, yes, there are scenarios in which one person will want to go in by themselves for a certain reason. In general, you do want to be moving together, coordinating as a team. If you're a tank, like a Reinhardt or a Winston, then you're a great engage tool for your team. Don't just go run in there by yourself, you're not going to do a whole lot of good. If you're a Winston is great at jumping behind enemy lines and disrupting. He creates an excellent opportunity for his team to capitalize on that and make a big push. But Winston jumping in by himself doesn't have the DPS, doesn't have the damage necessary to really accomplish much on his own inside a whole enemy team. Similarly, a Reinhardt, he puts up his shield, and that gives his teammates the cover that they need to be able to shoot back at the enemy unhindered without having to worry about dodging behind cover. You can unleash your full arsenal while behind that Reinhardt shield. But a Reinhardt by himself holding up that shield is not helping himself and not helping anyone else. This is advice for the tanks and the other people in the team as well. If you see Reinhardt have his shield up, well, make use of it. Stand behind that glorious blue rectangle. Don't make him hold up his shield for nothing. Don't run ahead of his shield and take damage when you could be not taking damage if you took 5 steps backwards. Also, if you're a Reinhardt and you've got your shield up and you've got allies around you who are depending on your shield, don't go charging off into the enemy team. Don't go taking down that shield unless it's about to break. But if it's about to break, your teammates can see that. They can see the cracks in the shield, and they should prepare for that. But if you just suddenly drop your shield without warning and charge off, if your allies die because of that, that's kind of on you. Another key part of a team is the healer, a Mercy or a Lucio, sometimes a Zenyatta. Healers need to be protected, especially Mercy. Mercy is very squishy, and she's not able to defend herself as well as the other healers. If you have a Mercy nearby, one of your priorities should be keeping her safe. If you see a Tracer zip by, maybe for you, that's not a big threat, but a Tracer is Mercy's nightmare. Save your poor Mercy. Also, if you want heals, don't move too far away from your healer. Your healer can't be everywhere at the same time. Your healer is likely doing his or her best to make him or herself useful, and they want to be healing you. But if you go deep off into enemy territory by yourself, well, your healer's not going to go on a suicide run just to save you and likely die when they can be saving the rest of your team. Another part of playing as a team is knowing your role. Knowing your character, what role they play in the game, and how that role fits into the given party composition. We won't do a full rundown on every character and every interaction, but in general, tanks are your engage tools. You've got that Reinhardt shield that allows his team to advance under protection. You've got Winston that's able to leap in and disrupt. Roadhog has his hook, Zarya has her shields, D.Va has her deflect, and all these tanks have a ton of hit points in order to try to absorb as much damage as possible. Direct that damage to them. Ideally, you don't want to be taking damage. No one wants to be taking damage, but if someone on the team is going to be taking damage, it should be the tank. They're designed to be the ones to take that damage. If you're support, you especially never want to be by yourself. Supports always want to be with someone, especially they want to be hanging around the tanks in general, but ideally they want to be near as many teammates as possible, because their toolkit revolves around either healing or buffing their teammates in some way, or sometimes nerfing enemies, again, so that their allies can take advantage of that. If you're an offense or a defense hero, then odds are your team will be relying on you to be racking up those kills. Your job generally is to bring the DPS, bring the damage. For instance, on offense, you got Genji and Tracer, who are really great flankers. These guys are great at getting behind enemy lines, getting around enemies, and taking out priority targets, like an enemy healer, for instance. In general, offensive heroes have kits designed to help you move into enemy territory, and defensive heroes have toolkits that help you hold a position and keep enemies at bay. Defense is where you get your snipers. This leads us into our next topic, our third point, which is always consider party composition and adjust as needed. In Overwatch, you need to be adaptable. You can't just play one hero. You can't play one hero in a given game and just stick with that hero. Unless things are working, then sure. But particularly if this strategy, if this plan isn't working, then consider changing your hero. Now this starts at the hero select screen. When you're first assembling your party, your team needs a support. It needs a healer, actually. Forget support. It needs a Lucio or a Mercy. Those are the only two healers. There are other supports, but if you see that, okay, someone picked a Symmetra, don't let that fool you. Don't think, oh, well, we don't need a support. If you got a Symmetra, you still need a Lucio or a Mercy. Mercy is the single target healer, and Lucio is the area of effect healer. In fact, having two supports on one team is a great idea. Similarly, a well-balanced team is then going to have at least one tank, oftentimes two tanks. Zarya, for instance, is a tank that pairs best with another tank. Same with Roadhog. These are two tanks that have sort of specialized functionalities, but you also want to have a Reinhardt or a Winston with you to kind of be the main tanking tank. Two supports, two tanks, that leaves you with two spots to bring the DPS. That's a completely balanced party. Now, I'm not saying you can't win if you stray from this formula, but if you want to optimize your chances of winning, a party that is well balanced has a much greater chance of winning than one that consists of, say, two Hanzos, two Widowmakers, and two Genjis. So once you've got your first composition, you move in, right? Depending on the map, you might want to pick different heroes. In King of the Hill, for instance, Lucio tends to be a really strong healer. But on a payload map, you might prefer to go with a Mercy. Similarly, Reinhardt tends to be stronger on the payload maps, but less strong in King of the Hill. But again, once you're in, once you're actually playing the matchup, if your team is losing, if things aren't working out, take a look at the enemy team composition. Think about changing up yours. Do they have a Bastion that's really locking your team down? Maybe try to go for a Genji. Genji can reflect Bastion's attacks and throw back a huge amount of damage at the enemy team, sometimes killing that Bastion if he's not quick enough to take his finger off that trigger. If the enemy team has a Pharah that's doing great damage, maybe take a Widowmaker to snipe her out of the air. We won't go into the full list of counter picks, we might save that for a future video, but again, just sort of think, because often it also depends on what else you have on your team. Every time you respawn and your team is losing, consider maybe if you need to switch out your hero for something that might be more effective. Fourth topic, I want to briefly talk about your melee attack. Some people don't even realize they have a melee attack, but every character has a melee attack. There's a melee button. I think the default key is V. I've rebound that to F, it's just easier to access. And it deals 30 damage at a rate of 1 attack per second. You can't hold it down, you gotta spam it, but it's 1 attack per second for 30 damage. An exception to this is Reinhardt. By default, Reinhardt's hammer is his melee attack. That deals 75 damage. And it's not just single target damage, it's dealt in an area. It seems like it would be an arc, but it's actually a rectangle. So it's a wider area than it is deep, but it's certainly a rectangle. And a little Reinhardt tip here, if you swing your mouse around and there's a lot of enemies around you, you can in fact hit, in one swing, a lot more enemies than you would think. And again, remember that because it's a rectangle, it extends further to the sides of you than it does ahead of you. It's easier to hit someone who's a bit further away if they're at a slight angle to you than if they're dead center. So just be sure to be swinging wildly with that mouse to try to get that rectangle to connect with as many people around you as possible. Torbjorn is another exception. He does have a normal melee attack, but if he has his hammer out, he's got his gun and his hammer. That hammer that you use on turrets also can be used on enemies, and that deals 75 damage as well. That's single target to differentiate it from Reinhardt's. To give some context to how much damage that might be, the primary fire for Torbjorn deals 70 damage. That's actually less than his hammer. And the secondary, that shoots sort of a shotgun spray of pellets, shoots 10 pellets for 6 to 15 damage. So that's a minimum of 60 damage to a max of 150, and that's assuming they all connect. So do not underestimate the value of hitting people with your hammer. And of course, Genji's ultimate, the Dragon Sword, is 120 damage. But let's give more context to how much that melee attack does in damage, that 30 damage. We got Genji. One of his shurikens deals 28 damage. Yes, he throws them in groups of 3, but one of those does 28, which is about the same as a melee attack. One McCree bullet does between 35 to 70 damage. One uncharged Hanzo arrow deals 28 damage. So if you're Hanzo and someone's in your face and you don't have time to charge your arrow, then it's actually better to melee than it is to just fire a limp arrow. Mei's secondary fire deals 22 to 75 damage, and Winston's attack deals 60 damage per second, so it's double what a melee attack is. But here's the most important thing about melee attacks, guys. When you are reloading, when you run out of ammo, that is the best time to do a melee attack. There's something called animation canceling, and it's a bit of a more complex topic. We might save it for a future video, but basically, let's say you run out of bullets, then you can do a quick melee attack to continue attacking, especially if your target is low on health and that melee attack might finish them off. Instead of waiting to reload, do that melee attack. You get an extra attack in, deal some more damage. Oftentimes the enemy is not expecting it either. But perhaps the best part of the melee attack is that it is super satisfying to finish off a Reinhardt by punching him in the face. Alright, last topic we'll cover here. Health, armor, and shields. They are all different, they all act differently, and it's important to understand the differences between them because this will actually affect, one, how you engage enemies, and two, maybe how you choose to either take armor, say from Torbjorn, or as Torbjorn, give armor, who you might prioritize healing as a healer, and so on and so on. So shields behave the same way as health, except they can regenerate. As long as you have shield, it will regenerate. If you lose your shield completely, it won't regenerate. The exception here is, of course, if you start with shield. If you're a character that natively has shield, then that shield will regenerate. For instance, Zenyatta. But if you have a Symmetra on your team, and your Symmetra gives you shield, as long as that shield doesn't run out, it'll always regenerate back up to full. If you go 3 seconds with taking no damage, that shield will regenerate. Also, if you have shield, it'll take damage before armor and before health. That's the order in which you lose health. First shield, then armor, then health. Armor is also similar to health, except it has damage reduction. That's something not many people know or realize. Armor has damage reduction. There's a lot of implications for this. So as long as you have armor, it doesn't matter whether you're at full armor or just 1 point of armor left, you're gonna have damage reduction. All incoming damage is reduced by 5. Well, technically how it works is that it reduces damage by 50% to a maximum of 5. So a Pharah rocket on a direct hit deals 120 damage. If you have armor, it'll be 115. But let's take a Tracer, for instance. Tracer's got those dual guns that shoot out tons of very, very low damage projectiles, but she shoots a whole lot of them. 40 bullets per second Tracer shoots, and each bullet deals 1.5 to 6 points of damage. So of course, if that will be reduced by 5, then that will be dealing basically no damage all the time, so it's instead halved. It goes from 0.75 to 3 damage. This makes armor exceptionally powerful against people like Tracer, people who deal damage in small, tiny bursts at a high rate of fire, and less effective against people like Pharah, who deal slow rate of fire, big damage in one shot. So let's consider D.Va, for instance, whose health bar is almost entirely shield. D.Va is great against a Tracer, against a Reaper, against a Soldier 76, a Winston. If you're in a tank v tank battle, Winston versus D.Va, that Winston is dead. Again, Winston's little electrical attack deals a lot of hits over time. Soldier 76, that machine gun, not as bad as Tracer, of course, but again, many hits. And something you might not realize, Reaper shoots pellets out of his guns. They're like little sawed-off shotguns. They shoot pellets. Altogether, those pellets deal a ton of damage, but individually, each of those pellets gets its damage reduced. Now, the other thing about shields and armor is that as long as you have armor, even your shields will take damage at that reduced rate. Shields will go away first, but the damage reduction from the armor still applies. Now, armor can be healed by either a health pack or a healer on your team if you normally spawn with armor. If armor is given to you, like by Torbjorn, then it can be healed, it just depletes. If your armor is healed, it actually heals faster than health. Any healing from other players is boosted by 50% when healing armor. So let's say you're Torbjorn and you're giving out armor, or you're on a team with Torbjorn and you see an armor on the floor, right? And you got a bunch of teammates. Who should go for the armor? Should it be the Reinhardt or the D.Va that already spawn with a bunch of armor and have a bunch of hit points? Or should it be a small squishy character like Mercy who has low health and could really benefit from that damage reduction? I guess I already said the answer. The squishier a person is, the greater the benefit of having armor. Tracer with armor becomes an even bigger nightmare to deal with. As for how shield might change your playstyle, Zarya is mostly shield. Her health is mostly shield, so that enables her to pop in, take a bunch of damage, then back away. As long as she's not taking any damage to her health, the damage she takes is just useless. Pops out for 3 seconds, regens her shield, pops back in, takes more damage. Again, it just regenerates like that. And combine that with her ability to shield herself with that active ability, and you can see how Zarya, when played smartly, can have amazing sustain without even needing a healer. So that wraps up this video. Hope you guys found it informative. Leave a comment on what you may have learned or with other beginner tips that you might have for other players. Check back in the future for more Overwatch guides. Check out these other videos, and subscribe to join Rhykker's Raiders to be alerted when the next video goes live. He cheated? I want that son of a bitch banned. I want him banned. I want to get this fuck where he plays. I want you to find this aimbot wall hacking cheater. I want him banned. I want his family banned. I want his cat and his dog banned. I want anything he ever installs on his computer banned.